I know. It took forever to find a guy. But most importantly, I think Mario Cristobal found the right guy. The new offensive coordinator is in. Shannon Dawson. Welcome to the
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, available free on YouTube. Shannon Dawson of Houston Cougars offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson is coming to Miami to fill that same role at the University of Miami, the new offensive coordinator after weeks or even months of searching. Mario Cristobal gets his guy. And folks, if you're watching this show or listening to this show for the first time, welcome. If you're a regular, you know that we here on Locked On Canes for the past week or so have been speaking very highly of Shannon Dawson. Ever since the news leaked last week that he was interviewing for the job. He had his interview last weekend. My understanding was, which was obviously confirmed by this happening today, he interviewed very well. I heard Dawson interviewed well. I also heard that former Clemson offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter went very well. And honestly, I couldn't be happier that Shannon Dawson and not Brandon Streeter is the new offensive coordinator of the Miami Hurricanes. Was quickly reported here late morning on Tuesday. I saw the Bruce Feldman tweet first about it. Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated had also broken the story. I'm not sure who exactly had it first. I always try to give credit where credit is due here on Locked On Canes. And weren't we all kind of thinking today, Tuesday, was going to be the day? Because everything got suspiciously quiet, right? All the buzz and the leaks. And folks, many of the leaks that have come out, and they've been few and far between. Many of the leaks that have come out in the past couple of weeks, I think, have been, kind of strategic leaks, maybe leaks by agents to get their clients' names out there. And then obviously some of the alleged leaks were probably just fake news that people were making up and just adding more intrigue to this. But Shannon Dawson is the guy, Houston Cougars offensive coordinator. And what intrigues me so much about this is Shannon Dawson has an air raid background. That's not really an avenue that Mario Cristobal has been down before with his offenses. I appreciate the fact that Cristobal is open to bringing air raid principles into his offense. But what sets apart Shannon Dawson from a cookie cutter air raid guy is that Dawson, similarly to Mario Cristobal, has a real emphasis on the line of scrimmage, establishing a running game. So that's kind of where Cristobal was able to, I'm sure, reconcile some of the differences that he may have with a quote unquote pure air raid versus something I would imagine at Miami is going to be more of a modified air raid. Air raid principles could be employed into this offense. I think that's going to be great for Tyler Van Dyke, as we're going to talk about. I think that's going to be sensational for Miami's wide receivers. And as a result of this, sensational for Miami wide receiver recruiting, because that's an area Miami has struggled a bit in recruiting wide receivers because receivers were not a big part of Miami's offense last year. That was one of the things that Josh Gaddis, who was also Miami's receivers coach, let Miami down in. So Shannon Dawson, we talk about the air raid lineage. He learned from Hal Mumme, the godfather of the air raid, and has worked at multiple stops, including Houston and including West Virginia years ago under Dana Holgorson, another air raid disciple. Shannon Dawson, he's, I think, right in that sweet spot where he's like a young-ish up-and-comer, but he's got some experience. He's 45 years old, so he's not like one of these 30-year-old wonder kids, but he's also not, a 70-year-old fossil or anything like that. And yet, despite the air raid background, Dawson, he's known for having a strong emphasis on the line of scrimmage. The resume is impressive. I mentioned he's worked before for West Virginia under Holgorson years ago before Houston. 2011 to 2014, he was the offensive coordinator at West Virginia. You know, he coached players like Geno Smith, Stedman Bailey, the wide receiver, who I think is a South Florida native. I remember running into Stedman Bailey around town before. Tavon Austin was in that offense. And the final offense at West Virginia that Dawson coordinated averaged about 500 yards per game. I think it was like 499.8 yards per game in his final season there. So he has overseen really prolific offenses, had worked with Kentucky and Southern Miss years prior. And, you know, last season at Houston, this was a really, really good Cougars offense that Dawson was coaching. And I also want to throw in Shannon Dawson. He's coached multiple different position groups on the offense, but his primary background is quarterbacking and quarterbacks coach. So he was just the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator at Houston. So I don't believe, maybe by the time some of you watch this and listen to this, his role at Miami might be more clearly defined. All we know is he's coming to be the next offensive coordinator. My assumption, and I think it's an educated assumption, would be that Shannon Dawson is going to serve as the quarterbacks coach at Miami in addition to being the offensive coordinator. And we like that. You know, we had our morning episode today with Larry Bluestein, and Blue even mentioned it. There was definitely a disconnect last year between offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis and quarterbacks coach Frank Ponce, that they couldn't get the quarterbacking on the same page. It's a lot easier to do that when the offensive coordinator is also the quarterback's coach. That's the most natural fit for that, okay? So assuming Shannon Dawson is going to be the OC and quarterback's coach, Miami's going to have to find a wide receivers coach. So that's going to be the next thing on the list. That's going to be the next domino to fall now that Miami has their offensive coordinator, who I believe is also going to serve as the quarterback's coach. But yeah, the Houston Cougars offense last year, fun to watch and very effective. They ranked 25th in the country at 455.8 yards per game. Wouldn't you love to put up yardage like that? And that's with, you know, Houston talent, group of 5 talent versus power 5 talent. Miami's offense last year compared to Houston's 25th ranked offense, Miami's offense ranked 86th last year at 367 yards per game. In scoring offense, Houston was top 20. I would kill for that. 16th in the country in scoring at 36.1 points per game. Miami was 97th in scoring at 23.6 points per game. And if you take the Bethune-Cookman game out of that, Miami was at 19.4 points per game. Oh, man. Houston also an area Miami's offense can improve upon. We talked about the defense needing to improve upon this as well on third downs, but we're talking offense today, not defense. You know, we'll talk about Shannon Guidry more, or not Shannon, Lance Guidry, Shannon Dawson. We'll talk more about the defense on another episode. But Houston's offense was very good on third down, 24th in the country. They converted 45.8% of their third downs. Miami was 51st on third down, converting 40%. And you talk about the work that Shannon Dawson has done with quarterbacks. If I'm Tyler Van Dyke and I'm looking at the numbers that Clayton Tune put up last year in Shannon Dawson's offense, I'm salivating. I mean, I'm salivating, and I'm not Tyler Van Dyke. The actual Tyler Van Dyke is probably fist pumping and doing cartwheels around campus right now when he looks at what happened with Clayton Tune. Houston quarterback Clayton Tune threw for 4,074 yards last year with 40 touchdowns to 10 interceptions while completing 67.3% of his passes. So that's what we're looking at. And obviously, Clayton Tune and Tyler Van Dyke are two very, very different people. But if you see what a quarterback did in this offense just a year ago, maybe it gives you an idea of what Tyler Van Dyke can do in this offense next year. So we have more coming up, talking Shannon Dawson, new Miami offensive coordinator, right here on Locked On Canes. But folks, if you're looking for a delicious treat, you don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. I got to introduce Shannon Dawson to some Built Bars. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal is to eat healthier this year. So if you're like me, you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, I've got just the thing for you. You've got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you. They are perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter, brownie, coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but guys, these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. I don't know why I emphasize the H in whopping. I think it's like an old Stewie Griffin thing. Didn't he used to do that on Family Guy? I don't know what's wrong with me. You don't need to wait around now to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. You can get them now at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head into Walmart or Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later because I love me some Built Bars. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So, it took very, very long to find a new offensive coordinator. Cristobal probably knew maybe as far back as November that this job was going to come open. He'd be looking for a new guy. Sounds like he has run perhaps more than a dozen interviews. We don't know exactly how many interviews Mario conducted before ultimately going with Shannon Dawson. We're about 2.5 weeks away from spring practice opening up. But guys, again, I will go back to this. I said it before. I'll say it again. For as frustrated as I was that the offensive coordinator search took this long, I told you it will be all worth it if Miami gets the right guy. And if they don't settle for somebody like a Doug Nussmeier, thank goodness they didn't, or for, I'm not a big fan of Brandon Streeter. I know that he was a part of national championship winning staffs at Clemson, but I felt like he was more a coattail rider of Dabo Swinney and all the amazing talent. I didn't really see Brandon Streeter doing anything that was all that, innovative and special. Like he was the reason why they were winning championships. And obviously, Shannon Dawson hasn't won championships, but my point on somebody like Dawson, when you've got, an up-and-comer who's got a very good resume as an offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and all that, and he has had so much success as an innovator at, West Virginia, obviously Power 5. But when you talk about a place like Houston, that's one of these kind of more high-profile group of 5 programs, when you look at the success that he's had at a place like that, it goes to show you he can get more out of inferior talent versus getting less out of superior talent, which I think was clearly the case for somebody like Josh Gaddis. If you look at what he did at places like Michigan and Alabama, right? Shannon Dawson is not a coattail rider. Shannon Dawson is someone who is actually elevated, 2- and 3-star talent. And now that he's coming to Miami, where there's a lot of 4- and some 5-star talent, I cannot wait to see what sort of success this man can have here. Okay. And so, ultimately, you look at possibilities for rounding out this staff. Okay. Shannon Dawson, offensive coordinator, likely quarterbacks coach as well, to be part of his job title. Now I wonder who the next piece could be, who the wide receivers coach could be. We had a long conversation yesterday with Malik Rozier, who joined us, former Miami Hurricanes quarterback, who played for and has even worked with James Coley. James Coley, I think, should be someone who is hopefully a strong candidate for wide receivers coach. If you could bring a guy like that in, maybe you slap like a co-OC tag on him to get a few extra bucks and a nice nameplate on the office. Give him a little bit more of a fancy title. Just get him on that staff recruiting. And, if you listen to our conversation with Malik Rozier yesterday, and I encourage you to, if you didn't, he makes the case, inside stories of just what an upstanding human being James Coley is and why this guy is so effective at building relationships, which ultimately makes him very effective in recruiting as well. Another name you could throw into that similar conversation would be T. Martin. T. Martin, who's been a wide receivers coach with the Baltimore Ravens. You see, the Ravens, by the way, hired Todd Monken to be their new offensive coordinator. So I'm glad Miami filled their job before Georgia is out there now looking for people to replace Monken with. So I'm glad Miami got their search over with, just in case they were thinking of talking to some of the same people that Georgia wanted to talk to. But T. Martin, who's been an offensive coordinator in college, former quarterback who's also worked as a wide receivers coach, excellent recruiter, and T. Martin's son, Caden, is a true freshman on the Miami Hurricanes baseball team. So if you could bring someone like T. Martin or James Coley in to coach wide receivers, I think these could be excellent hires to kind of fill out that staff. And a lot of the interviews that Mario Cristobal ran in recent days were obviously talking to OC candidates like Shannon Dawson, who interviewed this past Saturday, who ultimately gets the job. And I couldn't be more thrilled for him getting that job. But I'm sure he was interviewing others that could potentially be wide receiver coaches here and could potentially be offensive analysts on the staff, because Cristobal, kind of like Nick Saban at Alabama, loves to completely fill his roster of analysts and likes to get some big experience guys serving in analyst roles. So you got to look out for potential analysts as well. And yeah, guys, again, I'm thrilled. Shannon Dawson is going to be bringing some air raid to the University of Miami, but he also has respect for the line of scrimmage. But I think he can do wonders for Tyler Van Dyke. Again, Tyler Van Dyke, who thrived, in a spread offense a couple of years ago, up tempo under Rhett Lashley. Van Dyke put up huge numbers. If you look at the numbers that Dawson's quarterback at Houston last year, Clayton Tune, put up there, over 4,000 passing yards, 40 touchdown passes to 10 INTs, completed 67% of his passes. I think Miami has hopefully found the right offensive coordinator to bring out that beast in Tyler Van Dyke. Unleash the Kraken in Tyler Van Dyke. I think we found the right guy to do that. So, guys, it's always the right choice when you fire up the FanDuel app. The midway point of the NBA season is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers to threes drained. Oh, plus FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance with a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So do not miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So now Shannon Dawson, he's going to get a crash course the next couple of weeks, right? 2.5 weeks until spring practice, March 4th. He's got to study his personnel. He's got to figure out how to modify his playbook to fit Miami's talent. He's got to get on the phone with these players. I'm sure one of his first phone calls is going to be to Tyler Van Dyke. These guys have to talk shop a little bit, start building that relationship. And then, yeah, I don't know if Shannon Dawson is going to sleep more than a couple hours a night between now and March 4th, but it's going to be exciting. Here at Locked On Canes, we will be along for the ride, and we will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome to the U, Shannon Dawson. Miami crushed it. I love this hire. Thank you, Mario Cristobal. Thank you, everyone, for watching this. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you get your pods. We'll talk to you next time on another Locked On Canes on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.